Looking for a new daddy. Ours is bad. That's what two little girls wrote on a cardboard sign, standing alone at a crowded crosswalk. What they didn't know was that the man standing beside them, the stranger reading their sign, was their biological father, a millionaire CEO who had once walked away from their mother before they were even born. But what could drive a man to leave? And what might bring him back years later? Can love be rebuilt after abandonment? Can a child ever truly trust the parent who once wasn't there? And when the ghosts of the past return, in the form of an abusive ex-husband threatening custody, what kind of strength does it take to protect a family that's still learning how to call itself whole? This is a story not just about second chances, but about choosing to stay, about how family isn't always made by blood, but by presence, by showing up, again and again. So grab your heart, because this one's going to pull at every corner of it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because what comes next might just change how you think about love, family, and forgiveness. Let's begin. Grant Wells stepped out of his black car like he did every morning, polished, composed, unshakable. The May air in downtown Chicago was brisk, not yet warmed by the rising sun. The city buzzed with its usual rhythm heels clicking on pavement, horns echoing through traffic, espresso machines steaming inside corner cafes. Grant's leather shoes landed soundlessly on the sidewalk, absorbing it all with the ease of someone who had walked this world for years without pause. In one hand, he held a dark roast coffee. In the other, a sleek tablet glowing with today's market analysis, deadlines, projections, board decisions, the usual. He adjusted the cuffs on his navy wool suit as he walked. His steps were precise, measured, confident. The world knew him as the man who saved the failing biotech firm Driver Labs and turned it into one of the most influential health tech companies in the country. He was a visionary, a fixer, a genius, some said. But none of that explained why he suddenly stopped. At the corner of 6th and Halsted, outside a glass tower that mirrored the skyline, Grant froze mid-step, not for traffic, not for a pedestrian, but for a voice, a tiny voice, high-pitched, light, like the kind of sound that didn't belong here, among steel beams and ambition. "We're looking for a new daddy." The words were so soft he wasn't sure he heard them right. He turned, slowly, eyes scanning the sidewalk, his brows furrowed, confused. A few feet from the revolving doors of the lobby, standing beside a green utility box, were two little girls, maybe 6 years old. They were dressed almost identically, light pink dresses under worn denim jackets. Their shoes were scuffed. One of them had a Band-Aid on her shin, and both had curls that bounced as they moved, red gold curls, catching the morning light. They looked out of place, not just because of their size or the sweetness of their clothes, but because of how still they were. Their eyes searched the crowd, moving from one grown-up to the next, hopeful and uncertain all at once. Then one of them, her jacket missing a button, freckles scattered across her nose, stepped forward and tugged gently on the sleeve of a passing woman in a black suit. "Hi, would you be our new daddy?" The woman blinked, paused, smiled awkwardly, and kept walking. Grant stood still, halfway between logic and instinct. His mind said this wasn't his concern. This wasn't his story. Keep walking. "Wells, you have a meeting in 8 minutes." But his feet didn't move. The second girl, the quieter one, tried next. She approached a man on his phone. "Excuse me," she said. He never looked up. Grant felt a flicker of something deep in his chest, something old, faint, a memory buried beneath years of power lunches and press conferences. The girls regrouped, standing shoulder to shoulder now. The first one, the more daring of the two, held up a small piece of paper. It trembled in her hands. The edges were worn, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. Grant stepped closer, drawn not by logic, but by something else entirely. Curiosity, maybe, or something warmer. The paper read, in uneven, jagged letters, "Looking for a new daddy. Ours is bad." He blinked. The words looked like they had been written by a child, because they had been. A few backwards letters, a smudge of juice on one corner. He stared at it, trying to process what he was seeing. Then the freckled girl looked up at him, straight into his eyes. Her voice was clear, without shame. "Would you be our new daddy?" Grant lowered himself slightly to one knee so he could meet her gaze. What makes you say that?" he asked. His voice was lower than usual, gentle, surprised by its own softness. The quieter girl answered this time. "Because ours is mean," she said. "He yells at Mommy. He throws stuff. He tells us to go away when we cry." Grant felt his throat tighten. In boardrooms, he'd faced billion-dollar negotiations without flinching. But this was different. It wasn't just the content of what they said. It was how they said it, like it wasn't strange, like this was just what life was, like asking for a new daddy was as normal as asking for a snack. His eyes flicked from one child to the other. Something about them nagged at the back of his mind. Not just their words, their eyes. Green-gray, wide, familiar in a way he couldn't explain. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, almost without thinking, he said the words that surprised even himself. "I'd like to be your new daddy." Their eyes lit up. The louder one smiled so wide it broke something open inside him. The quieter one reached out and took his hand, like she'd known it all along, as if he wasn't a stranger in a suit, as if he had always been theirs. He crouched there, surrounded by morning traffic and polished shoes, while two little girls gripped his hands like anchors. And for the first time in years, Grant Wells didn't feel like a man walking toward a boardroom. He felt like a man who had just walked into his own life. He didn't know yet, but these girls, they weren't just lost. They were his. The elevator doors closed with a muted hum behind him, and Grant Wells leaned his back against the mirrored wall, eyes open but unfocused. He was 34 floors above the city now, safe in his glass-walled kingdom, but his mind was still back on the sidewalk. The girls, their voices, their faces, that paper sign. It was all still there, etched in his mind like something permanent. He had replayed the moment a dozen times already, and each time he hoped it would fade, that the feeling would dull. It didn't. He walked into his office and shut the door, bypassing his assistant's morning greeting. She watched him with curiosity, but didn't speak. Everyone in the building knew better than to interrupt when Grant wore that look. Not angry, not distracted, just distant, like he was staring at a place far away, and whatever lived there had taken hold of him. Grant stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city. His coffee sat forgotten on the table behind him. His tablet blinked with unread messages. The empire he'd built could wait, apparently, for once. What the hell just happened? He whispered the question to himself. He was a man who knew how to make decisions. That was his reputation: clarity, confidence, calculated risk. He had never second-guessed himself, not in public, not in private. But now, as the memory of that small hand closing around his fingers returned, He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. And something else. Quieter. He didn't want to name it yet. They had been so small, so matter-of-fact. Not crying, not begging. Just hoping. As if strangers might be kinder than what they knew at home. He pressed a hand against the cool glass of the window. The view was stunning skyscrapers and Lake Michigan glittering in the distance, but today it felt hollow. He looked down at the street far below, where he had seen them just an hour earlier, where he had crouched in a $1,000 suit and promised something he had no right to promise. He hadn't meant to say it. "I'd like to be your new daddy." The words had just come out, like a reflex. But they weren't just words, were they? They'd smiled at him, not with hesitation, but with total trust. That trust had shaken him, rattled something deep inside, beneath all the polish and structure, and that familiarity in their faces. He turned away from the window, sat down, rubbed his hands over his face. It couldn't be. That was 5 years ago. 5 years of distance, of silence. He'd walked away from all of it, buried it under work and ambition, told himself it had been for the best, that he wasn't ready, that she'd be better off without him. So why did those girls have his mother's eyes? A knock interrupted the spiral. "Mr. Wells's assistant asked gently. "Boardroom in 10. They're waiting on the pre-launch numbers." He blinked. Right. Work. His kingdom. "I'll be there," he replied. Standing up, he straightened his suit, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked out of the office like nothing inside him was unraveling. The hallway lights caught his sharp jawline, his clean shave, his composed expression. No one would guess what was clawing at him from the inside. The boardroom was already full when he arrived. Analysts, executives, legal counsel. They all turned when he walked in. The room shifted. Conversation softened. Grant Wells had always had that effect presence, gravity. He nodded to his CTO and took his usual seat at the head of the table. But even as the numbers flashed on the screen, even as words like rollout strategy and international licensing filled the air, his thoughts drifted back to the curls, the freckles, that shaky paper sign. He couldn't stop seeing it. After the meeting, he skipped lunch, told his team he needed a moment to himself. They didn't question it. Grant rarely took time off. When he asked for space, they gave it. He found himself walking, not far, just a few blocks from the office, past the coffee shop he frequented, past the florist where the receptionist bought birthday bouquets, past the building where he had once lived with someone else, Mara. Her name hit him like ice water. Mara Levinson. The last time he had seen her, she was standing barefoot in the doorway of a tiny walk-up apartment, her hair still damp from the shower, her face soft with hope. She had been holding something, a small box. Inside was a plastic stick with a pink line on it. He had said nothing, just stared at it, at her. She'd waited. Then she'd whispered, "Say something." Grant. He hadn't. Not really. He had muttered something about needing time, about not knowing if he could do this, about his father, about how screwed up everything had been when he was a kid. She'd reached for his hand. He'd pulled away. 3 days later, he had left, changed his number, moved cities, buried himself in a project so consuming that it erased every piece of that life. Or so he thought, until this morning, until 2 little girls held his hand like it belonged to them. He sat on a bench in a quiet plaza, elbows on his knees. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't look at it. Couldn't. The guilt came in waves. He hadn't asked if she kept it. He hadn't even checked. Part of him had assumed hope that maybe she'd chosen differently, that the future she carried wouldn't exist, that he wouldn't be tied to a family he wasn't ready for. But now he knew, deep down, in that place where there were no lies, he knew they were his. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the bench, breathing deep. The sound of city life moved around him, distant and muffled. His heart was racing. His chest was tight. What would he even say? Sorry for vanishing. Sorry I left you alone, pregnant, to raise 2 daughters on your own. He didn't deserve to be called anything but a coward. But they had looked at him with something else. Hope. And that was the problem. Hope was fragile. It didn't forgive easily. It broke. Grant opened his eyes. Tomorrow, he'd go back to that sidewalk. Not in a suit. Not as CEO. Just as himself. If they were still there. If she was. He needed to know. Not just for closure, but because the paper sign wouldn't leave him alone. Because the hand that wrapped around his reminded him of everything he thought he'd buried. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to run anymore. He stood, straightened his coat. And for the first time in years, he walked with no idea where he was going next, but knowing he had to go. The next morning, Grant Wells stood in front of his closet and stared at rows of suits that all looked the same. Navy, charcoal, black. They represented control, consistency, success. Armor for a man who never planned on being vulnerable. But today, he hesitated. He reached for something simpler. A soft gray sweater, jeans, a pair of shoes that didn't click against marble floors. It felt strange, less like dressing down and more like lowering a shield. By Nina, Mum. He was standing near the same corner on Halstead, just beside the building where he'd first seen them, Ruby and Elena. He didn't even know their names yet, but they had been in every one of his thoughts since the moment they walked into his life without meaning to. People passed by him in waves, oblivious. The city moved on without pause. Grant leaned against a lamppost, pretending to scroll his phone, but his eyes searched. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe they'd be gone. Maybe he'd made too much of it. Maybe it had been a strange coincidence, a moment that didn't deserve the weight he'd given it. But then he saw them, 2 small figures, sitting on a bench across the street, sharing a juice box. Their legs swung above the pavement, one rhythm slightly behind the other. The taller girl, the bold one, was talking with her hands, clearly mid-story. The quieter one just nodded and sipped, eyes soft and steady. And then Mara appeared. She came out of the pharmacy holding a brown paper bag. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun. She wore a simple jacket and jeans. Nothing about her screamed for attention. But still, Grant felt the world sharpen when she entered the frame. He hadn't seen her in years, but time hadn't changed everything. There was still that quiet strength in her walk, that softness in her jaw, offset by the way her shoulders seemed to carry too much weight. She hadn't noticed him yet. She stepped toward the girls, said something he couldn't hear, and they turned their heads toward her, then followed her line of sight. Their gazes landed on him. 3 sets of eyes. He took a breath. "Mara," he said, not loud, but not unsure. She froze. The bag in her hand tilted slightly, nearly slipping from her grip. Her eyes widened. He could see the recognition there, not instant joy, not rage, just disbelief, and something colder. She crossed the street slowly, her body moving before her expression could catch up. When they were a few feet apart, she spoke, her voice low and firm. "You shouldn't be here. I didn't come looking for you," Grant said quickly, hands raised slightly. "I didn't know. I saw them yesterday. I didn't know they were yours. They're not someone else's," she said, and the words hit with more force than if she'd shouted. He felt it. "You left before you even heard their names," she continued. "So don't act surprised now." "I'm not surprised," he said. "I'm stunned. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect them. I didn't expect you." "They were trying to talk to strangers," Mara said, her voice hardening. "Do you know what that means? Do you know what kind of desperation it takes for a 6-year-old to ask a stranger to be her father?" Grant's eyes dropped. "I know what it means," he said. "I saw it in their faces. That's why I came back." She didn't speak, just stared at him. He couldn't read her. "Anger, sadness, exhaustion, all of it I left you," he said. "I know that. I ran when you told me you were pregnant. I thought I'd only make things worse if I stayed. Then you were right," she replied, voice flat. Grant winced. Mara looked back at the bench, at the girls. "They're watching." He glanced over. The bolder one, he now knew her name was Ruby. It had to be stood up slightly on the bench to get a better view. Elena just sat still, her hands wrapped around the empty juice box. "Can I talk to them?" he asked. "No," Mara said. "Not now. You can't just show up and what? Fix everything with one kind word. That's not how this works." "I don't want to fix everything," Grant said. "I want to understand. I want to know them. I want to be part of something I should have never walked away from." Mara folded her arms, her expression unreadable. "Do you even know what you're asking for? I'm asking for a chance." Her lips tightened. "I used to rehearse what I'd say to you if you ever came back," she said. "But I stopped after year 2. I realized you weren't coming. I didn't think I could be a father," he admitted. "I thought I'd turn out like mine. Cold, absent, angry. I thought leaving was protecting you." "Well," she said, stepping back slightly, "if that's what protection looks like, I hope you're ready to do better this time." He nodded. "I am, but I know I have to earn that." They stood in silence, and then slowly she turned to the bench. "Girls," she called. They came running, Ruby ahead as always. Grant crouched instinctively as they approached. Ruby stopped in front of him, squinting at his face like she was sizing him up. "I remember you," she said. He smiled softly. "I remember you too." Helena stood beside her sister, quieter, her eyes softer. "I'm Grant," he said. "I used to know your mom a long time ago." Ruby blinked. "Are you her old boyfriend?" Mara made a sound in her throat. Half laugh, half sigh. "Something like that," Grant replied. Elena tilted her head. "You look like us." The words wrapped around his ribs. He smiled gently. "I guess I do." Ruby was quiet for a second. Then she pulled something from her jacket pocket. It was the same piece of paper. The sign. "Looking for a new daddy. Ours is bad." She held it out again. Grant took it, carefully, studied it, then looked at them. "I don't know if I'm ready to be everything you need," he said, "but I'd like to try." Mara's expression changed just slightly. Ruby looked at Elena, then back at him. "Do you like pancakes?" she asked. He blinked. "Yeah," he said. "I do." "Okay," Ruby said. "You can come to breakfast. But not too early. Mommy likes to sleep in." Mara raised her eyebrows. He smiled. "Got it. Not too early. Can I bring orange juice?" he asked. Both girls nodded. "Okay," he said, standing up slowly. "I'll see you soon." As they walked away, Ruby waved without looking back. Elena turned once, gave him a small smile, then followed her sister. Mara lingered. She didn't say anything, just gave him a long, hard look. Then she nodded once, a tiny nod, and then she turned, walked away with the girls, and Grant stood there, holding a wrinkled paper sign in his hand like it was made of gold. He didn't have a plan, not yet, but maybe that didn't matter. Maybe showing up was the first part. The rest would come, one step at a time, one morning at a time, one breakfast at a time. Grant didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed, fully clothed except for his shoes, staring up at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment, the soft hum of the city far below him. Chicago always felt a live, constant movement, horns in the distance, train whistles echoing across the skyline. But tonight, it felt distant, like the world was happening somewhere else, somewhere warmer, somewhere real. All he could see were their faces, Ruby's certainty, Elena's silence, Mara's guarded strength. That piece of paper, the crayon-scrawled sign, was still in his jacket pocket. He had unfolded it twice since getting home, just to look at it, not for the words, for the handwriting, for the crease marks, for what it represented. He tried to imagine them asleep, curled up beside each other in the same bed, probably sharing a blanket that wasn't quite big enough. He wondered if Ruby talked in her sleep, if Elena needed a nightlight. He had daughters. The thought came like a whisper and a roar at once. He didn't say it out loud, couldn't, but it sat there in the middle of his chest, pulsing. He turned onto his side and finally closed his eyes. At 6:30 the next morning, he was out the door. This time, he didn't stand across the street pretending to be casual. He walked up to the pharmacy where he had first seen Mara appear. It was a local place, small and tidy, tucked between a deli and a dry cleaner. A little bell jingled above the door as he stepped inside. The man behind the counter looked up and nodded. Grant didn't say anything. He browsed the aisles, waited. At 7:05, the door opened again, and Mara stepped in. She didn't see him right away. She moved quickly, grabbing a box of tea, a pack of tissues, toothpaste. Her routine was methodical, practiced. When she turned the corner and nearly bumped into him near the vitamins, she stopped cold. "You again," she said. "Not angry, but not pleased either. I wanted to talk," Grant said. "Not about the girls, about you, about everything." Mara looked around the small store. "Here, walk with me," he said. She hesitated, then nodded once. Outside, the morning air was cool. The city hadn't fully woken yet. The streets were quieter, gentler. They walked in silence for a while, passing shuttered cafes, the occasional jogger. Grant kept his hands in his pockets, not because he was cold, but because he didn't trust them not to shake. "I was going to tell you," Mara said suddenly. "Back then, when I found out, I picked up the phone so many times, but I couldn't." Grant looked over at her, his expression open, remorseful. "Why not?" "Because I remembered your face when I told you I was pregnant," she said. "You looked at me like I'd handed you a death sentence, like I'd ruined your life." His throat tightened. "I was terrified," he said quietly. "So was I," she replied. They stopped walking near a small, fenced community garden. Mara leaned against the rail. "I didn't know how to do it alone," she said. "I didn't have family nearby. I'd just lost my job. The apartment was too small, and then there were two of them." Grant blinked. "You didn't know it was twins?" She shook her head. Not until month 4. I cried for 3 days straight. His chest ached. I told myself you would have made it worse, she said, staring ahead. That it was better you weren't there. That I could build something steady without the threat of you leaving again. I didn't know how to be a father, he said. My dad, he was cruel. Silent, then explosive. I thought I'd become him. I thought the only good thing I could do was disappear. And so you did. He nodded, slowly, and that was a mistake. Mara didn't say anything right away. A bird fluttered to the fence beside them. A city bus rumbled past. You missed everything, she said. Their first words, their first steps, their fevers, their nightmares, their birthdays. I know. I'm not saying that to punish you. I'm saying it because it's true. You can't rewrite it. I'm not trying to, he said. Good, she replied, because I won't let you pretend those years didn't happen. Grant stepped closer to the fence, his hands wrapped around the cold metal. He stared into the garden beyond it, empty now. Just soil and signs waiting for spring. I don't want to erase the past, he said. I want to earn a place in the present. Mara looked at him then. Really looked. He looked different. Not just the sweater and jeans. Not just the absence of the boardroom stiffness. His eyes, they were clearer. Tired. Raw. They're smart, she said finally. Ruby's the brave one. She asks questions like she's interviewing the universe. Helena is more internal. She colors to think. She hums when she's scared. He smiled, quietly. I noticed that. She didn't speak until she was almost 3. Mara said. But once she did, it was always poetry. They're incredible, Grant said, the words honest and awestruck. They are, she agreed, and I built that without you. He didn't argue, but she added, softer now. They've started asking questions. Why we don't have a daddy. Why their friend's dad shows up to every recital. Why some men smile when they see kids and some don't. Grant exhaled. And then there was him, she said bitterly. Who, my ex-husband? Grant felt his posture shift. We met when the girls were 2. I was lonely. He was helpful, kind. At first. She paused, but it changed. He got loud, controlling, never physical. Not in a way that left bruises, but the fear was there, especially for them. He clenched his jaw. I left a year ago, she said. It took me too long, but I did. I'm sorry, he whispered. They needed more than what I could give them. So sometimes they go out and ask for things they think will help, like daddies, or cookies, or Band-Aids. The ache in his chest deepened. I want to help, he said. I don't want your money, she replied quickly. I know. I'm not offering that. Not only that, I want to help fix the broken light bulb in the hallway, pick up juice boxes, read bedtime stories. I want to be the guy who gets asked for help. Mara studied him, her eyes sharp. They will love you fast, she said. And if you leave again, I won't. You say that now. I say it because I mean it, and I'll prove it. She didn't respond for a long time. Then, she pulled something from her coat pocket, a folded piece of paper, a drawing, 2 girls, a woman, and a man, 4 stick figures under a sun. She handed it to him. Ruby drew this last night, she said. She said it's our new version. Grant looked at the drawing. He felt something in him fall apart and reassemble all at once. She's already imagining you in her life, Mara said. So if you're going to be there, really be there, you need to be ready. He nodded. Then come to the park tomorrow, she said. They have the afternoon free. He looked up, hope and disbelief mixing behind his eyes. I'll be there, he said. Don't be late. I won't. She turned and began to walk away. He stood there a moment longer, holding the drawing like it was glass. As she disappeared down the block, he whispered to himself, I'm going to show up, and this time, I'll stay. The next afternoon, Grant Wells arrived at the park 20 minutes early. It wasn't nerves exactly. It was something slower, heavier, like anticipation that had nowhere to go. He'd spent the morning restless, wandering his apartment, watching the clock, changing his shirt twice for no reason. This wasn't a business meeting. There was no deal to win, no pitch to perfect. Still, it felt bigger than any boardroom he'd ever entered. The park was small and quiet, a patch of green nestled between two rows of old brick buildings with ivy crawling up their sides. It had a single swing set, a sandbox with scattered toys, and a rusted merry-go-round that squeaked when the wind moved it. It wasn't much, but it felt honest. He chose a bench near the edge, beneath a tree, just starting to bloom. The air was warming now, hinting that spring had fully arrived. He sat, hands clasped, watching the children play. He wondered if he would recognize them instantly, or if they'd blend into the movement of the playground. He didn't have to wonder long. He saw Ruby first. Her hair bounced with each step, her little sneakers lighting up as she skipped across the grass, chasing something invisible. Elna trailed a few steps behind, holding a book. She wasn't skipping. She never did. But she looked content. Then he saw her. Mara. She was wearing a long beige cardigan, her hands tucked into the pockets. Her eyes scanned the park until they landed on him. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she walked toward him. No smile, no welcome, just presence. She sat on the opposite end of the bench, leaving space between them like it had been measured. They didn't speak for a while. Just watched the girls. Ruby was trying to convince Elena to help her build a fort from fallen branches. Elena seemed skeptical, but followed anyway, her book forgotten in the grass. They're really different, Grant said softly. They are, Mara replied. I always thought twins were identical in everything. She shook her head. They were born 10 minutes apart, but it might as well have been years. He smiled faintly. Which one's older, Ruby? She said. By just enough to remind everyone. Grant chuckled. Mara didn't. She was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, she spoke. You asked me once what I needed, she said. He turned toward her. What I needed, she repeated, wasn't someone perfect, wasn't someone rich. It wasn't even someone brave. She paused, her voice lowered, almost to a whisper. I just needed someone to stay. The words hit him harder than anything she'd said yet, because she wasn't accusing. She wasn't blaming. She was just telling the truth. He looked away, watching Ruby try to balance a stick on her head. I thought I was doing you a favor, he said. By leaving. She said nothing. I thought I was going to be the kind of man who breaks people, like my father. I saw his rage in myself, his silence, and I thought the best thing I could do was disappear before I made you hate me. You made me hate myself instead, she said. He turned, startled. I asked myself every day what I did wrong, why I wasn't enough, why you could walk away without looking back. I thought if I'd just been more patient. or understanding, or less hopeful. Maybe you'd have stayed. I didn't leave because of you, he said quickly. I know, she replied. That's the part that hurt the most. You left because of you, and I couldn't compete with that. The breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a baby cried. Someone laughed. A dog barked. The world kept going. Grant sat back, the weight of everything she'd said settling inside him. He looked at her hands, small, steady, worn by work and motherhood. You did it, he said quietly. You raised them. You gave them joy. She didn't respond. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a single photograph, printed the night before. It was from his phone, captured by chance as Ruby had handed him the drawing. In the photo, his hand reached out, the paper in between them, and Ruby's face was tilted upward, smiling. He handed it to Mara. She took it, looked at it for a long time. Then, without a word, she tucked it into her bag. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I just want the chance to know them and to show up again and again. And if they ask questions, she said, about where you were, I'll answer with honesty. And if they're angry, they have every right to be. Mara looked at him, eyes narrowing. And if I tell you this could go wrong, that they could fall for you, and then you get scared again. He didn't hesitate. Then I'll stay anyway. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. Just true. Mara glanced toward the girls again. Ruby had abandoned the stick fort and was now making up a song about dandelions. Elena was humming softly beside her. They haven't known a father, she said. Not really. Grant swallowed hard. They've known cartoons and books and teachers, but they've never known what it's like to have someone who says, I'm here. I've got you. He nodded. Then I want to be the one who shows them. Mara exhaled slowly, folded her arms. Start small, she said. Don't come in like a superhero. Just bring apples next time, and a good story. He smiled. Deal. Also, she added, they like silly socks. If you're going to stay, you'd better own at least one pair. He laughed, surprised. I'll work on it. Mara stood. We walk home from here. Can I join? She nodded once. Ruby spotted them and shouted, Hey, he's still here. Elena looked up, gave a soft smile, and began collecting her things. As they walked down the sidewalk, Ruby ran ahead, jumping cracks in the pavement. Elena lagged behind, holding Mara's hand for a while, then switching to Grant's without saying anything. And that was it. Not a grand return, not a sweeping forgiveness. Just 4 people walking home together. Not yet a family, but something close, something new. The following Saturday arrived with a softness that surprised Grant. For once, the city didn't feel rushed. The breeze was gentle. The light was pale and golden, and the sidewalks weren't yet crowded. He carried a small brown bag with him. Inside were 2 juice boxes, a packet of apple slices, and a book with dragons on the cover. It felt like an offering, or a peace treaty. He hadn't overthought it. Okay. Maybe he had. He'd paced in front of the juice aisle at the grocery store like he was trying to defuse a bomb. But eventually, he'd chosen the ones with bendy straws, remembering how Ruby had complained that the straight ones were boring. He reached the park exactly on time. Not early this time. Not waiting around like a question mark. They were already there. Ruby and Elena were sitting on a bench under the maple tree, feet dangling, whispering to each other in that animated way kids do when they're sharing a secret. They wore matching sweatshirts, one with glitter stars, the other with tiny kittens and Elena had her ever-present sketchbook on her lap. Mara stood a few feet away, arms crossed, sipping from a travel mug. Her eyes found him immediately. She didn't smile, but she didn't tense either. That was something. Grant approached slowly. Ruby spotted him first and gave a sharp wave like she was hailing a taxi. "You brought it," she called. He held up the bag. As promised, juice, apples, and one epic dragon. Ruby looked pleased. "Good. We're starving." Elena looked up at him. "What's the dragon's name I don't know yet?" Grant said, crouching in front of them. "Maybe we should figure that out together." Elena considered this very seriously. "Okay, but only if it's a nice dragon. Not one that eats villagers." "Deal," he said, smiling. He sat beside them on the bench, careful to leave enough room. Ruby grabbed a juice box and poked the straw in like a pro. Elena took the book first, flipping through it with wide, quiet eyes. "I like the way the fire looks," she said softly, tracing one of the pictures. Mara approached and sat on the other end of the bench. She didn't say anything at first, just watched. Grant handed her the second juice box. She raised an eyebrow. "You got one for me?" He shrugged. Habit. She took it anyway. For a while, the four of them just sat there, 2 children drinking juice, one man reading aloud about a dragon with a limp wing, and one woman listening in silence. It was calm. Mara broke the quiet. "You're good with them," she said, almost as if she was surprised by her own observation. Grant didn't answer right away. He looked down at Ruby, who was now leaning her head lightly against his arm. "I think I missed it," he said. "The instinct. It was always there. I just never gave it a chance to breathe." Mara looked at him for a moment. "You sound different than you used to." "I am," he said. "You can't outrun regret forever. Eventually it catches up, and either it destroys you or it changes you." She looked away. "You left before Elena could even open her eyes." "I know. I used to wonder if they'd ever meet you, if they'd know your name. Then I stopped letting myself wonder." He didn't try to explain. He didn't offer excuses. That silence, that pause, that was the apology. Ruby stirred beside him. "Mommy, can he come with us to the bookstore later?" Mara blinked. "We're going after lunch," Elena added. "We get 1 book each." "I'm not invited," Grant said quickly. "Only if it's okay." Mara hesitated. "I'll keep my distance," he added. "Just browse nearby. No pressure." She looked at the girls. Ruby was watching her with that familiar spark of expectation. Elena had already returned to her drawing, unconcerned, content. "Fine," Mara said, "but no buying the whole store." Grant raised a hand. "Scout's honor. Later." They walked together, not as a unit, but not completely apart either. The girls walked ahead, skipping cracks in the sidewalk. Mara walked with her arms folded, sunglasses over her eyes. Grant matched her pace, hands tucked in his coat pockets. "Do they ask about me?" he asked. After a long pause, Mara sighed. "Sometimes. Not as much before. But lately, yes." "What do you tell them? That you're far away? Busy? I never said bad things about you. I didn't want them growing up with bitterness." She paused. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for them." He nodded slowly. "That was generous of you," he said. "No." She replied. "It was necessary." When they reached the bookstore, the girls ran ahead. Mara and Grant stepped inside a few seconds later, the scent of paper and ink rushing up to greet them. Ruby disappeared into the adventure aisle. Elena sat cross-legged in front of the art books. Grant wandered toward a nearby shelf and pulled out a title at random, pretending to read. In truth, he was watching them out of the corner of his eye, watching the way Ruby turned every book over like she was interviewing it, the way Elena quietly tucked one under her arm and smiled to herself. Mara walked over, her voice low. "Do you want to be here for the long haul?" she asked. He didn't look at her. Yes. No second thoughts. He turned to face her. "My only regret is not doing it 5 years ago." Mara looked down at the book in her hands. "What if they get hurt?" she whispered. "What if I let them love you? And then you decide it's too much." "I don't get to decide that," he said. "Not anymore. I've already missed too much. I don't want to miss anything else." She stared at him for a long time, then gave the smallest nod. When they left the store, Ruby proudly held up her new book, The Princess Who Saved the Kingdom Herself. Elena had chosen a coloring book full of wild animals and dreamy forests. "Can we read it tonight?" Ruby asked him. He hesitated. "That's up to your mom," he said gently. Mara glanced at the sky. "If you're free after dinner, you can stop by." Ruby squealed. Elena smiled and took his hand again, and Grant realized something as he walked them back home. It wasn't about becoming a father all at once. It was about showing up, with juice boxes, with books, with presents, again and again, until someday they'd stop wondering if he'd leave and start knowing that he wouldn't. It was just after 8 p.m. when Grant knocked quietly on the apartment door. The building wasn't anything special: red brick, chipped paint, a slow elevator that groaned when it moved, but something about it already felt familiar. Like the kind of place where shoes pile up by the front door, and where windows fog during breakfast because someone's making pancakes. He heard footsteps, then the low click of the deadbolt. The door opened, and Ruby stood there with her arms crossed and one eyebrow raised, like she was auditioning for the role of gatekeeper. "You're 3 minutes late," she said. Grant looked down at his watch. "I got stuck behind a very confused delivery truck." She considered this, then stepped aside. "Okay, but next time, come through the alley. It's faster." "Noted." Inside, the apartment was small but warm, the kind of lived-in comfort that couldn't be bought. Books stacked on tables, a drawing taped to the fridge, a laundry basket peeking out from the hallway. Mara appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You made it. I wouldn't miss it." He held up a paper bag. "I brought cookies." "From that place on 7th. Elena's favorite," Mara said, quietly surprised. "You remembered? She mentioned it at the bookstore. Something about the ones with the shiny sugar." Mara took the bag without comment and disappeared into the kitchen again. Grant stepped into the living room, where Elena was already curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. She looked up and gave a small wave, then returned to coloring in a lion wearing a crown. Ruby had arranged 3 books on the floor. She pointed to them like they were finalists in a competition. "You get to choose tonight," she said. "High stakes." He crouched beside her, reading the titles. "Brave Bunny," "The Girl Who Flew," "The Bear with the Broken Song." She pointed to the last one. "That one makes Mommy cry sometimes." He looked over at Mara, who was setting down mugs of tea on the coffee table. "She gets emotional when the bear finds his voice again," Ruby added, casually. "It's about, like, finding your sound, whatever that means." Grant smiled. "That sounds like the right kind of story for tonight." They settled in together, Ruby on his left, Elena on his right, their small shoulders pressed against his sides. Mara sat in the armchair nearby, hands wrapped around her tea, her eyes watching quietly. He read. His voice softened, slowed, taking its time. The bear in the book had forgotten how to sing after being left alone in the forest for too long. His notes were cracked, his melody broken, but he kept trying. And eventually, he remembered the tune he used to hum when he was small. Halfway through the story, Ruby laid her head on his shoulder. By the end, Elena was asleep. Mara moved to scoop her up, but Grant held up a hand. "I've got her." He shifted carefully, gathering the sleeping girl into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, all soft limbs and steady breathing. Her head lolled gently against his chest. Mara led him to their shared room, 2 small beds pushed against opposite walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, a well-loved stuffed fox on each pillow. He laid Elena down, tucked her blanket around her, then stepped back. Mara adjusted the nightlight. Ruby followed a minute later, yawning dramatically. "Do you sing?" she asked him as she crawled into bed. "Not well." "That's okay. Neither does Mommy." He chuckled. "I'll work on it." He stepped back into the hallway as Mara pulled the door shut behind her. The light from the kitchen spilled across the floor, casting soft lines on the wall. Grant leaned against the frame of the living room. "She loves that bear," Mara said, returning to her tea. "He's quiet, but he still sings." "I relate," he replied. She looked over at him. "You've changed." He sat down slowly on the couch. "I've had to." "No," she said. "Plenty of people don't. They just keep repeating their damage." "You didn't." He didn't speak right away. "My therapist once said something I didn't want to hear," he said after a moment. "She said healing doesn't always look like redemption. Sometimes it just means learning how to stay, even when you want to run." Mara nodded slowly. "She sounds smart." She was right. Silence settled between them. Not heavy, not strained. Just full. Grant looked around the room. It wasn't glamorous. The paint chipped near the heater. The carpet was worn. But it was full of life. "I've spent years in places that were spotless," he said, "but I've never felt more at ease than I do here." Mara studied him. Her gaze wasn't suspicious anymore. Just careful. "It's the mess," she said. "That's what makes it real. The drawings on the wall. The socks that never match. The juice stains on the floor. I want to be part of it," he said. Mara looked down at her tea, then back up at him. "I believe you want to," she said softly. "I just don't know if I believe it's safe yet." Grant nodded. "I don't expect you to. Not yet." He looked toward the closed bedroom door. "But I'm going to keep showing up, until your belief doesn't feel like a risk anymore." She watched him for a moment, then got up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with a small basket. She handed it to him. Inside were 2 pairs of fuzzy socks, one pink, one purple, and a single note folded in half. "From Ruby, for when your feet forget where they belong." Grant stared at the socks, at the note. His throat tightened. "They made those last night," Mara said. "They said you'd need something to remind you." He looked up. "You already do," he said. "Every time I hear them laugh." Mara didn't smile, but her expression softened. Just a little. She walked him to the door. As he stepped into the hallway, she touched his arm. Barely. "Tomorrow," she said, "we're making pancakes. If you're serious about staying, bring syrup." He smiled. "I'll bring the good kind." She nodded, and then, without another word, She closed the door. Inside the quiet of the hallway, Grant stood for a moment, the basket in one hand, the warmth of that soft contact still lingering on his arm. He exhaled. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. And for the first time, it felt like he wasn't trying to prove something. He was just home. 2 weeks passed, quiet and steady. Grant didn't miss a day. He arrived with books, silly socks, a replacement smoke detector when he noticed theirs beeped at odd intervals, and a kind of patience he never knew he had. He no longer checked his phone at dinner. He didn't bring work inside. Instead, he crouched beside Ruby's science experiment on paper towels, helped Elena tape her drawings above her bed, and learned how Mara liked her coffee without asking. He never stayed late, never pushed, but he was always there. And slowly, the house began to feel like it expected him on a rainy Wednesday. Ruby came home from school with a rolled-up poster clutched in both hands like it held treasure. She unrolled it on the kitchen table, flattening the corners with cereal bowls. It was a drawing, a family portrait, stick figures with wild curls, exaggerated smiles, arms linked. There were 4 of them, underneath, in bright red crayon. The caption read, "My family." Mara stood behind her, frozen. Elena leaned in. I helped with the hair. Ruby pointed. "That's Mommy. That's me. That's Elena. And that's you." She looked at Grant as if it were obvious. He stared at the little figure with glasses and brown shoes. "You gave me glasses," he said, amused, "because your eyes look like they're always thinking too hard." Mara let out a sound, a half-choked laugh she didn't try to hide. Grant didn't say anything. He just placed his hand gently on the edge of the paper. His fingers shook, just barely. Later that evening, while Mara was rinsing dishes and the girls were deep into a coloring war over who got the glitter gel pen, Grant sat at the table, watching the portrait. He could feel the shift happening. He was no longer an outsider. He was something else now expected, assumed, folded in. It was a warm ache, the kind that scared him, because to be expected meant to be missed, and to be missed meant he mattered. He hadn't mattered like this in a long, long time. That weekend was the school's annual Spring Family Day. It was a small event: games, music, crafts, a potluck table with paper plates and fruit punch, and for weeks, Ruby and Elena were talked about it like it was the social event of the year. "You have to come," Ruby had said, eyes wide. "We're doing a song." "Will you be there in the front?" Elena asked, "so we can find your face?" Grant had nodded, throat tight. "Yes," he said, "you'll find me." Mara hadn't asked if he was sure. She hadn't needed to. His consistency had started to speak louder than any promise. Saturday morning came with blue skies and a breeze just light enough to lift paper streamers. Grant wore jeans and a button-down shirt. He brought orange slices, a folding chair, and 2 hand-drawn name tags with glitter glue that the girls had made the night before. The school courtyard was buzzing with energy kids darting between booths, parents sipping lukewarm coffee, music playing from a tinny speaker near the gym doors. Grant spotted the girls instantly. Ruby was bouncing on her toes in front of a poster board about community helpers. Elena sat cross-legged beside a pile of chalk drawings, a flower crown slipping down her forehead. Mara stood nearby, arms full of snack bags, smiling faintly at the chaos. When she saw Grant, she gave a small nod. He moved toward them, and for a moment, everything else faded. He belonged here. He helped tie streamers. He poured juice. He cut the crusts off a sandwich for a classmate who forgot their lunch. No one asked why he was there. Not yet. Then came the performance. The kids lined up on a makeshift stage, really just gym mats taped together, fidgeting in colorful shirts, some holding instruments too big for their hands. Ruby and Elena stood side by side in the second row. Before the music started, Ruby leaned toward the mic and said clearly, "Hi, this is for our family." Grant's heart stopped. Then the music played. Off-key, too fast, absolutely perfect. When it ended, he clapped louder than anyone. Afterward, the girls ran into his arms. You were watching Ruby beamed. "I saw the whole thing." "Did you cry?" she asked, suspiciously. "No," he said, but his voice cracked. She squinted at him knowingly. He stayed for another hour, helping with cleanup, posing for photos, even letting Ruby paint a blue heart on his cheek. It was perfect, until it wasn't. He was standing near the refreshment table when he heard them. Two women, chatting beside the lemonade jug. Their voices were hushed, but not careful. "That's the father, isn't it? I think so. I heard he left before they were even born. Just disappeared. And now he shows up like it's fine. Like he gets to play Daddy Grant froze. He didn't turn, didn't move." The words lodged deep in his chest. And then he saw Elena. She was standing a few feet away, holding a half-eaten cookie. She'd heard. He could tell by her face. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her eyes, the clarity in them shifted, like a shadow had passed over something bright. He walked toward her, careful, gentle. "Elena," he asked. She looked up at him, unsure. "Are you okay?" Her lower lip trembled. "Is it true?" she asked. You didn't want us." The question shattered him. He crouched, resting one hand on the ground to steady himself. "I was scared," he said. "When I found out your mom was going to have you and Ruby, I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I could be a dad. So I left." He waited, but I was wrong. He said, "I've been wrong every day since. And now that I know you, I love you more than anything, and I will never leave again." She stared at him, searching, then slowly. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I don't want you to leave again," she whispered. "I won't," he said, holding her close. Mara found them a few minutes later. Elena was quiet in his arms, her fingers twisted in the collar of his shirt. Grant looked up, eyes glassy. She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. They sat on a nearby bench. Elena nestled between them. After a while, Grant spoke. She asked if it was true. If I didn't want them. Mara's jaw tensed. I told her the truth. He said, not the polished version, the one with fear and failure. She nodded. They'll hear things, she said. People talk. I know. What matters, she continued, is what they see every day. And they see you here. He looked at her. Do you believe that, too? She didn't answer right away. Then, finally, she said, I'm trying. He reached for Elena's hand, and Mara didn't stop him. That night, the family drawing went back up on the fridge. But this time, the figure in brown shoes had a word written underneath it, scribbled in Ruby's handwriting. Daddy. The Monday after Family Day. Grant walked the girls to school. It was Mara's idea, though she hadn't framed it that way. Sunday night, as they sat folding laundry together, she had said casually, they'd like it if you were there in the morning, just for drop-off. He'd nodded, acting like it was no big deal. But it was. He didn't wear a suit, just jeans and a navy sweater, a little wrinkled from the girls climbing over him during story time the night before. Ruby insisted he carry her backpack because it makes us look more official, and Elena placed her favorite crayon in his coat pocket for luck. The walk was short. 6 blocks of cracked sidewalks, narrow crosswalks, and one small bakery that made the air smell like sugar and cinnamon. As they approached the front gate, other families moved around them in a blur of voices and backpacks. Ruby darted ahead, waving at classmates, while Elena stayed close, gripping his fingers with one small hand. They stopped just short of the school doors. "Will you be here?" after Elena asked. "Not today," Grant said gently. "But tomorrow. Pancakes after pickup. Deal." She nodded, looking satisfied. Ruby ran back for a quick hug fast, tight, and full of energy. Elena followed with a quieter squeeze, and then they were gone, disappearing into the building like sunlight through a window. Grant stood for a second, watching the doors. He didn't see the man until he heard his voice. "You've got nerve showing up here." The tone was low, coiled. Grant turned slowly. A man in a dark windbreaker stood just behind him. About his height, stubbled jaw, broad shoulders, eyes like steel. Mara's ex-husband, Eric. Grant knew it before he said his name. "You're the new favorite," Eric said with a smirk. "The great return. CEO turned family man. Nice optics." "I'm not here for optics," Grant said quietly. Eric stepped closer. "You think you're fixing something? You think you can just walk back into their lives and erase the last 6 years? I'm not trying to erase anything. I'm trying to show up." Eric laughed, but it wasn't amused. "You're not the first man they've loved. You won't be the first to disappoint them, either." Grant's jaw clenched. "You weren't there when she cried all night," Eric continued. "When Ruby had night terrors. When Elena refused to speak for days. You didn't walk the floor at 3 a.m. while she had strep and couldn't breathe. You didn't scrub marker off the walls after tantrums. I did. And then you broke them," Grant said, his voice calm but sharp. "Mara, the girls, you tried to make them small because it made you feel big." Eric's face darkened. "Watch your mouth." "I've been watching for weeks," Grant said. "The way they flinch when they hear shouting. The way Mara looks over her shoulder. You left something behind, and it wasn't love." Eric stepped even closer, his breath sharp with bitterness. "You're not family," he hissed. "You're just a visitor." Grant held his ground. "If that's true," he said, "then I'll be the kind who never leaves." Eric stared at him for a long moment, then spat on the ground and walked away. Grant stayed there for another minute, letting his hands unclench slowly. His heart pounded, but his face was still. He didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. Later that afternoon, he told Mara. They were in the kitchen again, the sun spilling across the counter, Ruby's backpack open on the floor, Elena humming as she peeled stickers off her notebook. Grant waited until the girls went to the other room. Eric saw me at drop-off. Mara froze, mid-pour. "He spoke to you?" she asked. Grant nodded. "What did he say enough?" Her jaw tightened. "Did he threaten you?" "No, but he doesn't want me around." That was clear. Mara leaned back against the counter, eyes clouded. "I've tried to keep them away from that part of him," she said. "The part that hurts in words and silence. But sometimes it leaks through. Do they still see him? Not by my choice. There's a court order. Twice a month. Supervised visits." Grant said nothing. "I fought it," Mara added. "But the judge believed he hadn't done enough damage to remove him completely. That's unacceptable. It's the system," she said bitterly. "It protects the appearance of parenthood, not the quality." He looked at her. Do you want me to help? Her eyes narrowed. Legally. Whatever you need. I have resources, lawyers, connections. I can build a case that's harder to ignore. She hesitated. I don't want him to take it out on them. He won't. You don't know him like I do. No, he said, but I know you, and I know them, and they deserve peace. She turned away, wiping a plate slowly. This was supposed to be simple. Just you showing up. Just bedtime stories. I didn't want it to turn into a battle. It's not a battle, he said. It's protection. They stood in silence. Then Mara sighed. Let's talk to someone. Quietly. Off the record first. Grant nodded. I'll make the call tomorrow. That night, he stayed a little longer. Ruby fell asleep mid-sentence, her head on his lap. The picture book opened to a page with a starry sky. Elena curled under her blanket, watching him quietly. Before he left the room, she whispered, even if he's mean again, you'll still come back. Grant crouched beside her bed. Always. She reached out and placed something in his hand, a folded paper heart, creased at the edges. For luck, she said. He tucked it in his pocket. Outside, the air had cooled. He stepped into the night with the paper heart still clenched in his hand. There were still echoes of pain in this family, but now there were echoes of something stronger. Presence, promise, love with roots, and that made all the difference. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Mara was folding laundry on the couch, socks and pajamas, mostly when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something in her gut told her to. Hello? There was a pause, then a familiar voice, tight, flat, clipped. This is Ms. Franks, from Child and Family Services. I'm calling regarding a report filed earlier this week concerning the care and custody of your daughters. Mara sat up, heart racing. What? What kind of report? I can't disclose the reporting party, the woman replied. But there were concerns raised about recent individuals entering the children's lives. A man, specifically. Her stomach dropped. Grant, I can't say names over the phone, Frank said, but we'll need to schedule a home visit to assess the environment and verify the safety of the minors. Mara's hands clenched the laundry towel in her lap. They're safe, she said, her voice sharp. This is standard. Franks replied, we'll send an official notice by tomorrow. When the call ended, Mara just sat there, staring at the clean pile of socks. 10 minutes later, Grant was at the door. He didn't knock, just walked in. Mara had long since stopped locking it when she expected him. The moment he saw her face, he knew. What happened? She handed him the phone. He listened in silence as she recapped the conversation. When she finished, he looked up slowly. Eric. Who else would it be? She said bitterly. Grant paced the living room once, then twice. His hand ran through his hair, pulling at it. He's trying to discredit me. And by extension, you. They'll come to the house. Grant. They'll question the girls. They'll look at our lives like they're crime scenes. I can handle it, he said. We both can. Mara stood. I can't go through this again. Her voice cracked, and it startled them both. She didn't cry. Not really. But the sound that came out of her was more than frustration. It was exhaustion. That hollowed-out kind of fear that lives under your ribs when you've already survived too much. I've built everything from scratch, she said, over and over. After he left, after the divorce, after the court hearings, I rebuilt every time. But I can't keep rebuilding if someone keeps setting the foundation on fire. Grant moved to her. He didn't touch her, just stood near, like a lighthouse instead of a lifeboat. You're not rebuilding alone anymore, he said. You say that. But what happens when they ask about your past? She asked. When they see the years you missed, when they start poking holes in your sudden reappearance like you're a fraud, then I'll tell them the truth, and I'll show them who I am now. She stared at him, eyes burning. Grant, she said softly, this isn't about charming a jury. This is about two little girls who will hear things they don't understand. Questions that sound like blame. About you. About me. And if we're not airtight, if we flinch or falter, they'll feel that. He exhaled. I won't flinch. She watched him. Then, slowly, she nodded. I'm calling my lawyer. Tonight, I'll call mine, he said. That weekend, the girls were quieter than usual. Mara didn't tell them about the visit. Not yet, but they felt the tension. Children always do. Ruby kept asking, You're still coming next week? Right, Elena stayed close, coloring over the same butterfly 3 times in a row. On Sunday night, after story time. Ruby looked up at Mara. Are we in trouble? The question was so soft, so tentative, it almost broke her. No, baby, Mara said, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. You're not in trouble. Ruby looked unsure. But you and Grant keep whispering, and you look tired. I'm tired because I worry, not because of anything you did. Is someone mad at us? Ruby asked. Mara hesitated. Then Elena, who hadn't spoken for most of the evening, said, Is it him? They both turned to her. Elena's voice was quiet, but steady. I heard Mommy crying last night. I know it's him. Mara crouched down, cupping her daughter's hands in hers. He can't hurt you anymore, she said. You are safe. Ruby blinked. Even if he says lies. Especially then, Grant said from the hallway. They turned. He stepped into the room slowly. He'd been waiting outside, not wanting to intrude, but he'd heard everything. I know some grown-ups don't tell the truth, he said, kneeling, and that can be confusing. But I promise you, I will never lie to you, even when it's hard. Ruby leaned against him. Will you still be our daddy? He looked at Mara. She didn't nod, but she didn't look away. Yes, he said. If you want me to be, I will. Elena reached out. We already picked you. The day of the home visit arrived 2 days later. Ms. Frank's was polite but clinical. She walked through the apartment with a clipboard, checked the smoke detectors, opened the fridge, peeked under the sink. She asked questions. Lots of them. Where do the girls sleep? What are their routines? What is Grant's role in the household? Are you a resident here? Mr. Wells, she asked at one point. No, he said, but I'm present. She raised an eyebrow. Can you define that I'm here when they need me? I help with meals, with bedtime. I show up for school events. I read stories. I make waffles on Sundays. I hold space when things are hard. That's what presence means. Ms. Franks nodded. She asked the girls some questions, too. Simple things. Favorite colors. Bedtime rituals. Then she asked, Who lives in your home? Ruby said, Me, Elna, and Mommy. And who else? Elna looked at Grant. Sometimes. He doesn't live here. She said, But he stays. Franks tilted her head. Stays in our hearts, Ruby said. And on weekends. Mara stifled a laugh. By the time Franks left, the room felt a little lighter. Not solved, but less haunted. That night, Mara and Grant sat on the fire escape, legs dangling, watching the city flicker. They believe us, she said. They should, he replied. She looked at him. I hated you for so long. I know. I thought if I saw you again, I want to throw something. I would have deserved it. But I don't feel that now. She said, "What I feel is relief." He looked at her, his voice barely a breath. "Why?" "Because I'm not alone anymore." They sat in silence, watching headlights pass on the street below. And then Mara added, "You know what else? What I'm finally angry. At him." Grant turned toward her. "I'm angry that he stole our peace, that he convinced me I was lucky to be tolerated, that he made our girls afraid of their own shadows." Mara's voice didn't shake. It was steel. "I want to fight back," she said. Grant took her hand. "Then let's burn the whole lie down." The letter arrived on a Friday. It was pale yellow, delivered in a plain envelope without markings, but Mara recognized the law firm's name in the return address instantly. Her hands tightened before she even opened it. She stood in the hallway, Grant at her side, both of them silent as she slid a finger under the seal. It wasn't a surprise. They'd been waiting for it. Still, her stomach twisted as she read the words aloud. "Eric Halperin hereby petitions the court for a modification of the existing custody agreement, seeking full parental rights and physical custody of Ruby and Elena Levinson. The petition includes allegations of emotional instability, unsafe influence from a non-biological male figure." She stopped reading. Grant had already paled. His jaw tightened. "He's trying to take them." Mara let the letter fall to her side. "He won't. I'll get my attorneys on this now. I already called mine," she said. "But Grant, this is real. A judge will hear this. He's claiming I endangered the girls by letting you into their lives. That's not just an attack on you. That's on them, too." She nodded. "He's trying to erase their voice, their choice, and we won't let him." That night, the house was quieter than usual. Mara didn't tell the girls, not yet. She couldn't bear to see fear grow back into their eyes, not after all the light that had returned in recent weeks. But Ruby noticed something was off. "You look worried," she said after dinner, poking at her mashed potatoes with a fork. "I just have a lot on my mind," Mara said gently. Ruby tilted her head. "Is it the man who makes you frown?" Mara paused. "What makes you think that? Because when you talk about Grant, your mouth gets soft. But when you talk about the other man, your shoulders go up." "From the living room," Elena added softly. "He used to yell when I spilled juice." Grant met Mara's eyes, heart aching. Later that evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Mara handed Grant the custody petition again. "It's not just about me being their mother. It's about who gets to define family." He read through the pages slowly. Eric's claims were strategic, cold, designed to stir doubt Grant's absence, his high-profile job, the lack of legal connection to the girls. But they were also riddled with half-truths, the kind that could be unraveled with enough time and the right truth. "I'm going to file an affidavit," Grant said. "If the court wants to know who I am, they'll get it." Mara nodded. "My attorney is submitting evidence. Photos, witness statements, therapy records." "Therapy?" Grant asked. Surprised? "I've been in it for years. The girls, too. I've kept journals, notes, drawings. The whole arc of our healing is documented." Grant exhaled. "That might save us." "No," she said. "We save ourselves." The next morning, they met with their lawyers in a small office downtown. The walls were lined with books, the windows fogged with condensation. Mara sat straight, her voice calm but full of fire as she laid out her timeline. Grant answered every question with precision. By noon, the strategy was clear fight to preserve the existing custody structure, expose Eric's history of psychological abuse, and formally request a background review of his recent conduct. We'll need statements. Mara's lawyer, Dana, said. Character witnesses, including you, Grant. He nodded. Whatever you need. Also, she continued, it might help if we show that you're building a legal relationship to the girls. Mara blinked. Like what guardianship? Or even adoption? Grant looked stunned. Adoption? It's premature, legally speaking, Dana said. But if this relationship is real, and it's long-term, it gives us leverage. After the meeting, they walked outside into the cold. Adoption. The word hung between them like something holy and terrifying. I didn't expect that, Mara said. Grant stopped on the sidewalk. I didn't either. But would you? He didn't look away. I'd do anything to keep them safe. That evening, Grant arrived early. He brought dinner takeout from Mara's favorite Thai place and a stack of papers from his legal team. But most importantly, he brought intention. At bedtime, Ruby curled up against her pillow and whispered, Will you still be here when we're older? Grant crouched beside her bed, smoothing the blanket. As long as you want me. Forever. If I can help it. Yes. She grinned. Good. Because Elena says you're like a quiet bear. You stay soft, but you don't run away. Grant smiled. Then Ruby said, I want you to be our real dad. He froze. You are real, she added quickly. But I mean, like on paper. Elena sat up across the room, like when people ask. And we don't have to explain it. The room stilled. Mara, standing in the doorway, pressed her hand to her heart. I'd be honored, Grant said, his voice catching. If that's what you want. It is, Ruby said. It is, Helena echoed. Later, in the living room. Mara sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. They want you as their father. I want to be, but that won't protect them right away. No, he said, but it's the beginning. She reached for his hand. Do you really want to do this? All of it. The court hearings, the paperwork, the slow, hard truth of becoming something you weren't. Before I want the slow, he said. I want the hard. I want the bedtime tantrums and the school recitals and the runny noses. I want it all. Mara leaned her head against his shoulder. I believe you, she said. I'll prove it, he whispered. She closed her eyes. They weren't just fighting for custody. They were fighting for definition, for a version of family forged not in blood, but in choice, and that kind of bond. It was harder to sever than anyone realized. The courthouse was quieter than expected. Muted floors, echoing hallways. That strange blend of nerves and routine that lingers in public buildings where people come to fight for what matters most. Mara wore a navy dress, not formal, but strong. She had her hair pinned back and carried a file folder full of evidence calendars, drawings, therapy notes, photos of pancake breakfasts and school recitals, her life, in fragments, prepared to be inspected. Grant stood beside her in a dark blazer and worn-in shoes, his tie slightly crooked. In his hand was a folded piece of paper, his affidavit. It held no fancy legal language, just a promise in his own words. They didn't speak much in the waiting room. They didn't need to. When their case was called, they walked in together. Mara held her chin high. Grant's hand brushed against her back, reassuring, steady. Eric was already seated at the other table. His lawyer adjusted papers without looking up. Eric didn't meet Mara's gaze, but she didn't flinch. The hearing moved quickly at first. Eric's attorney spoke of consistency, of biological rights, of the so-called dangers of Mara's unstructured lifestyle and Grant's sudden reappearance. They tried to paint Grant as a novelty, a wealthy man playing house. But when Dana stood, she was unshakable. She spoke of patterns, of trauma, of stability rebuilt not through control, but through presence. She submitted drawings, school attendance records, character statements from teachers, neighbors, and therapists. Then it was Grant's turn. He stood at the witness box with the paper still in his hand. "I don't come here pretending to undo the past," he began. "I left when I shouldn't have. I was afraid. I thought I didn't know how to be a father." He looked at Mara, then at the judge. "But I've learned that fatherhood isn't something you qualify for. It's something you show up for, every day, especially on the hard ones." He placed the paper on the table, his voice steady. "Those girls have never asked me to be perfect. They've only asked me to stay." There was silence. Then the judge looked down at her notes and said simply, "We'll take the petition under review." They left the courthouse under overcast skies. On the steps outside, Mara exhaled, "I hate that he still has power." "He doesn't," Grant said. "Not really. Not where it matters." Later that night, they were all in the living room when the doorbell rang. It was a courier, envelope in hand. Mara opened it at the table, the girls watching nearby. She read it twice before saying a word. "Well," Ruby asked, bouncing. Mara smiled, slow and stunned. "We won," Elena gasped. "We don't have to go, no visits, no more threats. Full custody is mine. Ours." Ruby whooped and launched herself into Grant's arms. "Does that mean you stay forever now?" He looked at Mara. She nodded once. "If you'll have me," he said. Elena held up her drawing. It was the family again, only this time. The stick figures were inside a house. Warm light filled the windows. "You already live here," she whispered. That weekend, Grant filed the first papers toward legal guardianship. They didn't call it adoption yet. It wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about naming what had already become true. The girls started referring to him as Dad without blinking. He walked them to school without hesitation. He brought cupcakes to Ruby's class on her birthday, read books about space and kindness in Elena's classroom, and got a note from a teacher that said simply, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Weeks passed. One Sunday morning, they took a walk downtown. The four of them, side by side. Wind tugged at coats, and Ruby kept pointing out every passing dog. They stopped at a crosswalk. The light was red. Mara slid her hand into Grant's. "Do you remember what you said," she murmured, "about staying even when it's hard?" He nodded. "I think," she said, "we've done it." The light changed. They walked forward together. Back at the apartment, the kitchen buzzed with pancake batter and laughter. The window fogged up again, just like it had that first morning. And taped on the fridge, beside the old drawings and weekly schedules, was a new picture. It showed 4 hands in a row, each holding the next. Beneath it, written in Elena's neat handwriting, was a single line. "Family is who stays. Family isn't always the people who brought you into this world. Sometimes it's the ones who chose to show up long after the damage was done, who stood still while others ran, who held you when no one else would, and who looked at your scars not with shame, but with love." Grant didn't come back because it was convenient. He came back when it was hard, when the pain was real, when doubt was louder than hope, and somehow, step by quiet step. That was enough. But this story isn't just about healing. It's about how easily we judge someone's worth by a past they're no longer living in. It's about how broken systems sometimes protect appearances over people. And it's a reminder that emotional abuse leaves bruises no one sees, but children feel them deeply. So tonight, if this story moved you even just a little, share it. Not just because it's beautiful, but because it matters. Tap like if you believe love is a choice. Share it for someone who needs to hear they're not alone. And don't forget to subscribe, because more powerful stories like this are coming soon. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. See you in the next one.